Hi, Safe Families volunteers. My name is Candace Schoenberger. I'm the chapter director at the Pittsburgh chapter in Pennsylvania. I'm really excited to be here with you today and share some tips for active listening. I put together this training because we are doing things differently at Safe Families because of everything that's going on in the world, but we want to be able to maintain the relationships that we have been building with our families. We don't want to lose that connection, and it's so important that we don't lose that connection with families that are typically isolated from society anyway. A lot of these tips are therapeutic listening tips, and the framework of this training was pulled from the Stephen Ministry Training Manual. And so here we go. I hope you enjoy it. First off, there are 3 characteristics to a good listener. The first is desire. You have to want to make these calls. If you don't want to make these calls, the family that you're calling is going to know that. They're going to know you're just kind of checking off a box on a list of things to do for the day. So make sure when you call, you are in the right frame of mind to do so. The second characteristic of a good listener is patience. You can't be anxious to get off the call. You have to just settle in and have a good conversation with the family that you're talking to. We've all been stuck in the house. We all know what that feels like. And for families who've been isolated on a regular basis, they probably don't have a lot of people checking in on them like maybe you do. And so whenever they get that phone call, it might be a longer call than you're expecting. So make sure that you've built some extra time in to really just have a good conversation with them. This is part of that relationship building process that you've been doing over time with this family. The third characteristic is one of commitment. Commitment to the person that you're listening to in that moment and to the relationship that you're building. And those are really important. That's a really important characteristic of listening. Commitment is telling that person that you're in that relationship for the long haul, right? That this isn't just, I'm calling to check in because I feel like I should do that and I'm not going to call again throughout this social distancing piece, right? You're going to call them and then you're going to say at the end of that phone call, is it okay if I call you in a couple days, or is it okay if I call you next week to check in again? It helps them feel like there's a safety net around them so they're not just falling free fall through life. And that's so important for a family to feel that support. So now that we know what the characteristics of a good listener are, we want to talk about what the skills of good listening are. What are the tangible ways that you can actually listen well? So if you're lucky enough to be able to do a video chat with someone, you can also check in on their nonverbal communications. If their nonverbals are not matching what they're verbally saying, that's giving you a clue that something's going on. Typically, our nonverbals give us more honest information about how we are physically feeling and emotionally feeling than what we are saying. We often have been taught to mask how emotionally we are feeling with our words, but we're not really very good at doing that non-verbally. And so if you're lucky enough to be doing a video chat with your families, that's one of the ways that you can check in. Another skill to listening is you want to listen to how a person's situation, mood, personality changes over time. If you see marked changes in any of those 3 areas, that's going to tell you that something is going on and you want to delve a little deeper in those 3 areas. If you've noticed that their mood has declined, if you've noticed that their personality has changed, those are also things that you can check in on. And you can also associate it with, hey, I noticed that you're feeling a little down. Is it because of having to stay home with the kids? Are you feeling that stress? And just give them kind of an open door to really explore those feelings with you. Another skill is listening to what is not being said. Some people release stress by talking about it. Other people struggle to talk about the thing that is stressing them out the most. Sometimes you need to ask gentle but direct questions about things that are not being said, and that gives the person permission to talk about the things that might be really hard for them in that moment. Just gives them that opportunity, that permission to say, I can say these things out loud to this person because they seem to understand that this might be a stressor for me and I don't have to be ashamed of that. Active listening is a skill that good listeners and therapists use all the time to communicate to speakers that they are involved in the conversation that they're having. You're going to try to limit any distractions that you have. And if you have a distraction, you're going to summarize what was being said to make sure that the speaker knows that you were listening even through that distraction. You want to make sure that you give enough time for the conversation And you want to make sure that you ask questions. And the type of questions that you ask is important. Rather than asking yes or no questions, you have to ask open-ended questions. So instead of saying, did that make you angry? You can say, well, how did that make you feel? And it gives the speaker this opportunity to really open up about what is feeling. You can also ask clarifying questions. Clarifying questions are questions that you use to help you understand what was said, use to communicate to the speaker to make sure that they understand that you're listening and paying attention. Okay, we made it to the last skill. Aren't you proud of yourself? The last skill that listeners want to use is reflection. You want to reflect back what the speaker is saying. So anytime a family is talking to you, you want to be able to say back to them in your own words what they've said. So every so often during a conversation, you want to be able to repeat back to them in your own words what they said. This allows the family that you're talking to feel heard, feel like you're paying attention, and feel like what they're saying matters. And it increases that relationship, that trust, and that safety. And that's really what active listening and these good listening skills do. It builds up this level of trust and this level of safety and this feeling of being cared for. And it reduces that feeling of isolation, which is really what everybody needs during this time. And so what you're doing by making these phone calls and by using good listening skills, it is providing care to your community in a way that's really desperately needed right now. It seems like such a small thing, but for families that are isolated on a day-to-day basis, you making these phone calls helps them to remember that there are people out there that care about them and love them, and that they can trust and that are going to be there for them. And so these good listening skills can make them feel those feelings of safety and trust if you're using them well. And that's why they're so important. So now you've mastered the characteristics of listening and you know the skills of good listening, and the family that you call feels really safe and they trust you, and they begin to vent all of the stress and frustration that they've had over the last 2 to 4 weeks where they've been social distancing. What do? First, don't panic. You already have all of the skills that you need to really take care of the person that you're talking to. So the first thing you're going to do is really reflect back to them what you hear the biggest stress is. And then you're going to use that to ask some open-ended questions to help shift their mindset from that anxiety spiral to a mindset of really problem solving, right? You're not going to do any of the problem solving for them. The open-ended questions will help put them into that place. So some of those questions may be like, what could relieve some of that stress? Or who could be a support person for you through that? What could be something that would help you get through the day? What would need to change to make you feel better through the day? What are some ways that you could take care of yourself through this stressful situation? And then you're going to offer them support, right? And that support's going to look different than the typical kind of support that you would offer them because of the social distancing that we're all practicing right now. You offer the kind of support that you feel that you're going to be able to follow through on. That's the most important part. Whatever you offer, make sure that you can follow through on, because relationship and trust go hand in hand. So make sure that if there is a need that the family you're talking to is presenting over the phone that you don't feel capable of handling in a phone conversation or through phone check-ins, that you reach out to your chapter director to ask for some support for that family. Your chapter directors are going to know which social service agencies are offering what when it comes to tangible needs and when it comes to financial needs and when it comes to medical care. We're a team, and we can meet the needs of our families together if we work together, but we have to know what the needs are, and that's why these phone call check-ins are so important. Thanks for taking some time to freshen up your listening skills. I hope that it was helpful. I hope to see all of my volunteers in person soon. In the meantime, I'm going to leave you with a verse from Romans 8. The Spirit Himself intercedes for us with groans that words cannot express. And he who searches our hearts knows the minds of the Spirit, because the Spirit intercedes for the saints in accordance with God's will. My prayers of peace and hope go with all of you. Happy social distancing!